Alrighty, hey everyone. It's April 25th, 2025. I'm Michael Winkler, and this is the Mike Wink Show. I'm going to start today talking about a bit more of an abstract concept, a little bit. An article we're going to look into today discusses the FDA's plans to suspend milk quality tests. There's a there's a disconnect between the amount of effort it takes to create these systems and the amount of good faith that is required to create them, and what is necessary to destroy them, and then also what is necessary to bring them back in the future after they've been destroyed, right? So I guess the idea is that, like, I feel like it's sort of similar to how humans don't do a very good job of grasping really large numbers. Our brains just aren't equipped to really, like, visualize and properly understand numbers above like 10,000 or something. It becomes sort of ethereal and abstract to us. Um, I almost feel like there's a similar sort of thing happening here with regulations and common sense stuff like milk testing that's getting cut, in that, like, it's very easy. It seems very easy in comparison to trick a bunch of people to vote for somebody like Trump and then cut eventually end up cutting this sort of thing, like the testing of milk, rather than get enough people on board to put that in place, right? It requires a certain amount of collective thinking, and I think that collective thinking is mostly gone, especially in the Republican Party. But yeah, there's this huge disconnect between the amount of effort that's required to create these programs and these regulations and the amount of effort that's required to take them away. And what terrifies me is that the idea that, like, people, the generations that came before us were raised in a somewhat different manner, in a way that valued things like empathy, things like caring for your fellow neighbor. And I think maybe that's due to the fact that they didn't have online, right? Their only exposure to the world was in real life. They didn't have the online, like, anonymous way of expressing themselves. They only had our tangible world to deal with. And so as a result, it wouldn't surprise me if people were a bit more empathetic and a bit more collective thinking, and also just generally a bit more thoughtful and less selfish when it comes to thinking about political matters. But it just seems to me like I'm terrified that we're heading towards a reality where we're slowly going to see these things chipped away, right? We're going to see things like milk testing get chipped away. Maybe they're going to say certain types of drugs aren't liable to be tested anymore. Or maybe they'll even go as far as to say they aren't, like, it's unconstitutional for there to be prescription and non-prescription drugs, and that it's your freedom as an American, or your right or whatever, to be able to go over the counter with any type of medication, no matter how dangerous it may be. I'm just worried that, like, they're gonna just slowly keep axing away at this, and that we're not gonna have the mechanisms to bring them back. That people have changed, changed. That the fundamental mindset behind um, people in society at large has shifted in such a way that makes building these things really difficult. And so I just can't keep escaping that feeling that, like, it's a one-way street, pretty much. I guess you can go back a little bit, but, like, I guess my point is that it'd be really hard to put it all back. And so I guess similar to this is the argument that, like, about libraries, right? Libraries are an inherently socialist, by, like, the colloquial way we use the word socialist. It's a very socialist program, right? It's this place where you go and there's free access to books and free access to other services. They have computers, they have printers, they have they have access to certain banking and things like that. Libraries would not exist right now if it wasn't for prior generations' efforts in bringing libraries to fruition. I think if libraries never existed in the United States, like, it was only this, like, concept, like, oh, we knew about you hear about the Library of Alexandria or these other libraries in historical context, but we don't really have any significant access to them in the United States in a public sense. Um, and then we tried to introduce it, I think there's absolutely no way people would call it socialism. Are you insane? Blah blah blah. Where's the value in this? People should. Oh, you should. You don't have free. Nothing owes you. Nobody owes you anything. Nobody owes you access to books. Nobody owes you access to computers or whatever services the library may offer. Go pull yourself up by your bootstraps basically and get your own fucking book or get your own computer or whatever. I just feel like it always ties back to empathy. It always ties back to empathy and how important it is to have empathy being the North Star, the guiding light by which all of your political everything points towards. And you have to filter it through a layer of practicality and reality. And sometimes the maximally empathetic thing the government could do may not be the most practical or realistic thing to be done. Certainly. But it should be the guiding principle through which you are like you're trying to work towards that, right? And so many people seem to think that the empathy is like an individual feeling. It's a thing that is reserved exclusively for interpersonal relationships. It's not to be applied in any societal or systemic context, which is just silly to me. Yeah, empathy. Just it's not a bad word. It's empathy is not a bad word. It's important, and if you weren't taught that by your parents, yeah, I'm really sorry. All right, now let's go on to the actual article. So, US FDA suspends milk quality tests amid workforce cuts. I can't believe I'm even reading this article title. It's so ridiculous to even think of. Like, why on earth would we ever cut milk testing? It seems so fucking stupid to me. And like, I understand if I understand that like the mechanisms and whatnot behind this are separate from what causes people the raw milk fad, but like I can't help but like make some sort of light connection there. I don't know. The Food and Drug Administration is suspending a quality control program for testing of fluid milk and other dairy products due to reduced capacity in its Food Safety and Nutrition Division, according to an internal email seen by Reuters. The suspension is another disruption to the nation's food safety programs after the termination and departure of 20,000 employees of the Department of Health and Human Services, which includes the FDA as part of President Donald Trump's efforts to shrink the federal workforce. This is I I tell so many people this. I feel like I tell people this on an almost daily basis. This idea that like small government versus big government argument is just inherently stupid. It's a really dumb way to look at politics because there are good things the government does and there are bad things the government does. There are good regulations, there are bad regulations, there are good pieces of legislation, and there are bad pieces of legislation. I can't believe I'm having to say this. And that all of these individual pieces need to be evaluated on their own merits. So it doesn't make sense to say the government doing things is bad or that big government is bad when you could have a piece of big government that does ostensibly good, that is a practically, by almost every measure, a good program, but you're going to argue it's bad because it's a big government program, a big government bad. That would be illogical. And so this idea that just cutting the federal workforce, just shrinking it, just indiscriminately, is so stupid. It's 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 beyond stupid. It's apolitical. It's like it is devoid of any political logic. It doesn't make sense. It's just not a well thought out concept. Um, and it infuriates me just how common it is, and just like that they've an entire one of the two major political parties. Pretty much one of their ethos is to just cut taxes, shrink the government, reduce the government, whatever. And it's so like it's so brainless. It's just so brainless. And like you can have a nuanced discussion about the role government should play in authoritarianism and yada yada yada. There are real hard discussions to be had there, but you should never let your principled alignment to being anti-government outweigh any normal, practical, logical assessment of a piece of legislation or regulation or policy. if you are so hard line that the government is bad and that big government is bad and this and you're so stuck in the small versus big government argument that you the FDA this month also suspended existing and developing programs that ensured accurate testing for bird flu in milk and cheese and pathogens like the parasite Cisclospora in other products. Effective Monday, the agency suspended its proficiency testing program for grade A raw milk and finished products, according to the email sent in the morning from FDA's Division of Dairy Safety and addressed to network laboratories. Grade A milk or fluid milk meets the highest sanitary standards. The testing program was suspended because FDA's Moffitt Center Proficiency Testing Laboratory, part of its division overseeing food safety, is no longer able to provide laboratories support for proficiency testing and data analysis, the email says. So Trump isn't really going in and cutting all the DEI hires and whatnot. No, he's going in and cutting the people that are fucking testing your milk to make sure you don't die from it. Because, surprise, surprise, there isn't all that much waste, true waste and fraud that goes on in these government agencies. If you want to look, the one place in the government where you can probably find a ton of waste and fraud is the military, is the Department of Defense, because they can't pass audits. They haven't been able to pass audits, and I think I even read they don't even have the mechanisms to do an audit if they wanted to. And so it's the only agency, I'm pretty sure, that doesn't have an inspector general. I might be wrong about that. I'll double check that. But it's the only agency that isn't subject to audits. It isn't subject to the same level of scrutiny that other agencies are. And so if you really want to find waste, fraud, and abuse, go there. But they'll never look there. It's completely against the conservative and Republican uh, mindset at this point, or they've been completely captured, and it's impossible to get them to support cutting the military in any way, shape, or form at this point. It's so much worse than I thought it could be, though. I It's so easy. See, this shows even the surface level way I can even me can look at things. Is I see this and I go, oh, they're not testing for bird flu and other pathogens. Oh, that makes it sound so much worse. It makes it sound so much worse when they actually name the things that they're testing for, and that's obviously kind of silly and surface level, but like it shows that I don't even know if people are, by reading the headline, they're taking this seriously enough. Effective Monday. I already read all that. An HHS spokesperson said the laboratory was already set to be decommissioned before the staff cuts and through proficiency testing. And though proficiency testing would be paused during the transition to a new laboratory, dairy product testing will continue. Oh, okay. The Trump administration has proposed cutting $40 billion from the agency. The FDA's proficiency testing programs ensure consistency and accuracy across the nation's network of food safety laboratories. Laboratories also rely on those quality control tests to meet standards for accreditation. The FDA is actively evaluating alternative approaches for the upcoming fiscal year and will keep all participating laboratories informed as new information becomes available, the email said. So wait a minute. Have I been misled here? Okay, so this email this is misleading because it says an HHS spokesperson said the laboratory was already set to be decommissioned before the staff cuts and though proficiency testing would be paused during the transition to a new laboratory, dairy product testing will continue. It seemed like all of that was, oh, wait a minute. It seems like all of that was established pre Trump taking office. So are they saying, it looks like what they're saying is that, okay, so this article is kind of misleading. It's sort of implying that the Trump administration, directly through cuts to the workforce at the FDA, has caused this shortage in employees, and therefore they're unable to test milk. That's sort of what the headline and the way it sounded to me when I saw this mentioned elsewhere yesterday as well. But it turns out actually that um, this was planned. This was in the works for a while, and that the Trump admin actually has no direct connection to the pausing of milk testing right now, but it says they have proposed cutting 40 billion from the agency. Let's see what this says. You know what? Plug it. It says that they proposed cutting 40 billion from the agency. I wonder if this article maybe gives some more information if they actually have done something. I'll add a note here. It's really tempting in these kind of moments whenever so like going into it, I thought the Trump admin had made cuts to the FDA and that caused milk testing to be taken away. Turns out that's not so. I've looked into it more and turns out that's not really quite the case. They do want to cut the FDA and that would probably cause problems, but it isn't them that's causing the pause in milk testing. This was planned from before and that they're going to resume it. It's really tempting for me in these moments to not just still run with it whenever I have conversations with conservatives, right? Because all the time when I have conversations with conservatives, they'll bring up something like this, right? They'll see a headline that makes them think Biden did something bad like this. Oh, a great example of this is the fucking the electric chargers. So I believe it was part of the it was either the Inflation Reduction Act or whatever the big package was that had the infrastructure stuff that passed under the Biden administration. Under it was like some X billion amount, 30 billion or 50 billion or 50 million or some chunk of a big chunk of money was dedicated exclusively to facilitating the building of more electric car charging ports across the country. There were headlines going around that basically said, "Oh, they took in $20 billion or whatever the amount was, and only made 9 chargers or 8 chargers or 15 or whatever they say, some really small number." And the implication is that they're so corrupt and inept that they've used $20 billion, legit used $20 billion to make like 14 chargers and have just basically pocketed the rest of the money or the rest of the money just disappeared. When really so when you look into it though, that's not the case. There's really like 15,000 chargers or something that are under construction. That's just these things take years to do. These are complicated projects. These are high electricity things. You got to have people come in and do the right zoning. You got to have people make sure that the wiring is done properly. You have to have construction. You have to have the city approvals. There's so many layers to this. And so when I point that out, they seem to just not care. And I guarantee you they continue to go around and make that point. And so I do the research. I actually give a shit. And so when I hear something like that, I'll look into it and see if it's true. It's really tempting when I'm talking to some of these conservatives who I know don't really fundamentally give a shit and they're not actually going to look into it. And then I could just tell them, I could just be like, "Oh, you hear the White House cut the FDA and they cut their milk testing." And they'd probably say that's a bad thing. That milk testing, I could probably get them to agree that milk testing is a good thing and that cutting it is a bad thing. Even though it's not them that cut it, they're never going to look into it. At most, they would look at a headline and potentially probably come to the same conclusion I thought it was going into it. It would take the full reading of the article to actually realize, oh, wait a minute. The 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 is the original article I was just looking at. The title US FDA suspends milk quality test amid workforce cuts. The amid here is doing so much heavy lifting. Holy crap. So much heavy lifting. I can't even begin. Wow. Okay. Well, you learned something new. Turns out the Trump admin didn't kill milk testing. They just maybe want to. All right. So let's move on to something a bit less serious and let's go a little more fun. Luigi Mangione. So Article was released today talking about how the prosecutors want to seek the death penalty. I heard something about them wanting to charge him with terrorism or something, which to me seemed weird because who would he be terrorizing? If they were going to try and charge him with terrorism, and I guess all of y'all know this, he's the guy who assassinated the United U.S. healthcare or the United Healthcare CEO, dude. Who would he be terrorizing? Are CEOs or executives or rich people a protected class? It wouldn't surprise it wouldn't surprise me if Trump tried to do something like make being over a certain net value a protected class, which would be just amazing. All right. So Luigi Mangione pleaded not guilty on Friday to federal charges of gunning down health insurance executive Brian Thompson, a day after prosecutors formally stated their intent to seek the death penalty. Mangione, 26, wore a tan jail issued T-shirt as he was led into the packed Lower Manhattan courtroom. He previously pleaded not guilty to a separate set of New York State charges over the December 4th killing of Thompson, the former CEO of United Health Group's insurance unit, United Healthcare. He entered the plea at an arraignment before U.S. District Judge Margaret Garnett. The brazen shooting of Thompson outside a Midtown Manhattan hotel where the company had gathered for an investor conference and the ensuing 5-day manhunt captivated Americans. Authorities say the words deny, delay, and depose, a phrase that echoes tactics some accuse health insurers of using to avoid paying out claims, were found written on shell casings at the crime scene. I completely forgot that he did that he wrote it on the shell casings. That is some like that's some like that's like a superhero movie thing. Like that is that's very powerful. It's very powerful. While public officials condemned the killing, some Americans have cheered Mangione, saying he drew attention to steep U.S. healthcare costs and the power of health insurers to refuse payment for some treatments. In justifying their decision to seek the death penalty, prosecutors wrote in a Thursday night court filing that Mangione presents a future danger because he expresses an intent to target an entire industry. Oh my God. And rally political and social opposition to that industry by engaging in an act of lethal violence. All right. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi earlier this month announced that the Justice Department would seek the death penalty for Mangione. Thursday's court filing by the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office formalized prosecutors' intent. Mangione's lawyers have said Bondi's April 1st announcement was unapologetically political and breached government protocols for death penalty decisions. I'm not a lawyer, but my gut reaction is absolutely. If Mangione is convicted in the federal case, the jury would determine in a separate phase of the trial whether to recommend the death penalty. Any such recommendation must be unanimous, and the judge would be required to impose it. Bro, whoever's on this jury, I'm not going to go so far as to say, like, if you're supposed to do your job as a juror, right? Like, if you're on the jury stand and the evidence clearly, to your eye shows that he did it, then yeah, you're supposed to say he did it. He done did it and point your finger at him and say he's guilty. So I'm not going to say you should lie there and just be like, "Oh, don't charge him." But what I will go as far as to say is that if you are on that jury and he is at that point where he's finding him guilty, I think it is okay to then go to use your to use your, I don't know, you can call it political motivation or whatever you want to call it, to say I am not in favor of the death penalty. I think that's totally fair. I think there's so many ways you could justify not being in favor of killing him, that it is reasonable. And I think even if you come at it from a political perspective, as long as you are being fair as your role as a juror, as long as you are properly saying he's guilty or not guilty, whether the facts say it, for what the facts say, then I think it's totally fine for you to just be like, no, you've done your job as a juror. The next step of saying that he should be executed is not. There's no duty there, and it does seem like, how could you argue presents a future danger because he expressed an intent to target an entire industry and rally political and social opposition to that industry by engaging in an act of lethal violence. So what's their evidence that he was trying to make something happen? Like that he was trying to start a movement, or that this was like, I don't, there's no way that the deny, defend, depose that he wrote on the shell casings is enough to make that case. You need something more. You need like social media posts from him talking about wanting to start, yeah, wanting to kill these healthcare CEOs, or there are things he could do that would make that maybe make sense, but just him writing that on the shell casings is not enough. I haven't seen any other evidence that they're going to present with regards to that. And also, the healthcare industry is not a protected class, right? Being rich or a CEO, or specifically part of United Healthcare, is not a protected class. And so I don't know how they could really argue that he's some future danger, because like he would you wait a minute, this seems so illogical. He's going to be in prison. Right? Like, we're not talking about whether he's innocent or guilty. We're talking about whether he gets the death penalty or not. If he's in prison, how can he possibly present a future danger? He's in prison. This doesn't make any sense to me, actually. That is the point to me that seems weird. How can he present a future danger if he's in prison? That doesn't, no. Like, I understand that just because you're in prison doesn't mean you're completely secluded from the world, like a Charles Manson or whatever. Like, you'll have interviews, you send letters to people, whatever. But like, he's in prison. You can't. I don't know if you can really argue with a straight face that he has the capacity to present a future danger if he's in prison for life. That seems insane to me. But if Mangione, blah, blah. If Mangione is convicted in the federal case, the jury would determine in a separate phase of the trial whether to recommend the death penalty. Yeah, this is where people should step up and say no. If he did it, he did it. Like, he don't need to be killed for it. Alrighty. So let's move on to, oh my God, this story is wild. This story is absolutely bananas. I saw this yesterday and it blew my mind. So I'll just read the article. The radicalized son of a CIA director was killed last year while allegedly fighting for Russia in Ukraine. According to a new investigation, Michael Alexander Gloss, the 21-year-old son of the CIA's Deputy Director for Digital Innovation, Julian Galina Gloss, and a Navy veteran father, was killed on the front lines after enlisting in the Russian army, according to a lengthy investigation by independent Russian outlet Important Stories. Gloss's obituary said his fiercely beautiful life was taken from us during his travels overseas on April 4th, 2024, without detailing exactly how. With his noble heart and warrior spirit, Michael was forging his own hero's journey when he was tragically killed in Eastern Europe, the obit said. Before leaving on his travels, Gloss shared images of him giving the finger to the White House and also video of a burning flag. Border Service data showed that he crossed into Russia via Georgia in August 2023, sending photos of his adventures to a group chat of friends in the Rainbow Family, a loose-knit counterculture hippie group, according to Important Stories. That September, Gloss appeared in Russia's Unified Medical Information and Analytical Systems of Moscow, where his address was listed as a medical examination room at an army contract recruitment point on Yablokova Street. The same address given to foreign mercenaries who arrive in Moscow to join Russian forces in the Ukrainian conflict, according to the report. So this is the bombs. Julianne Galina Goss. The selfie snapped by a Nepalese volunteer at the Avant-Garde training center in Moscow appears to show Gloss in military fatigues and a red keffiyeh. A video posted by another Nepalese man shows Michael shaved bald at the facility posing with fellow soldiers. Michael's training group, which consisted mainly of Nepalese nationals, was eventually bused to their military unit, the 137th Ryazan Airborne Regiment. Video from the bus ride appears to show Gloss wearing his keffiyeh. After arriving at the training unit, Gloss made an account on the Russian social media website Odna blah blah blah, where his profile photo shows him lying down in the red keffiyeh in a bunk bed that looks identical to those seen in videos posted by his Nepalese comrades, according to the investigation. A fellow soldier on the 137th Ryazan Airborne Regiment who knew Michael well said the American had his own vision of how he could be useful at the front. Yeah, his own vision of how he could be useful at the front. Yeah, if you're an American traveling to, especially an American who's the son of a diplomat and the CIA director, right? You're wealthy, you're well off, you're never gonna be homeless or have to worry about anything like that. Um, if you're gonna go to Russia and then enlist for Russia to fight against Ukraine, yeah, you're gonna have your own vision, his own vision of how he could be useful at the front. AKA, he thought he was Rambo and that he was invincible and that this was all a big game, basically. He studied construction and engineering in college, so all his thoughts were connected with inventions and innovations. The soldier who went by Peter told important stories. Glass confirmed to his Rainbow family friends that he was in Russia on December 19th, but made no mention of his military activity after not speaking in the group chat for 2 months, the report said. That same month, Peter said Glass was sent to the assault units. Parts of the 137th Regiment were deployed northwest of Soledar in the Donetsk region at that time, according to important stories. Gloss last logged into Telegram on March 14th, 2024, 2 weeks before the 137th Airborne Regiment began an offensive on Ukrainian positions. While the exact circumstances of Michael's death are unknown, it was on the same day as the 106th Division, which includes Gloss's regiment, posted on Telegram that its paratroopers were continuing their offensive push in Donetsk in the face of poor conditions and unfavorable positions. So that seems consistent with what I've heard. There's this meme going around that like Russia treats its soldiers sort of like it treated its soldiers in World War II. And in World War II, they really sent them in the meat grinder, right? They just fucking send them by waves into machine guns. And they didn't have enough equipment, so they'd send one guy with a rifle and then his buddy with the ammo to pick up the rifle whenever he died. That really did happen back in World War II. And I think it seems like there is sort of a more willingness to for Russia to uh, use its human capital. I'm going to use corporate speak here for a second. Just send people to die basically in riskier types of missions. They seem more willing to do that than the Ukrainians, which makes sense. Strategically, I guess that makes sense, as well as like it just fits the. It seems consistent with what I've heard that they're not the best at protecting their frontline people, and they're not the best at putting them in the best positions. And that's, for the most part, why there's been a slightly higher death toll on the Russian side than the Ukrainian side. Julianne Galina Gloss was appointed to the CIA's Deputy Director for Digital Innovation in February 2024, just weeks before her son's death. She did not respond to messages Friday. She graduated from the United States Naval Academy in 1992 and became the first female commander of the Academy's Cadet Corps. She spent the next 30 years working in intelligence and technology, both with the military and as a civil servant. Her husband, blah, 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 I don't care about what he did. Michael Gloss's funeral wasn't until December 21st, 2024. A Rainbow family text sent by a man who had talked to Gloss's sister said his family was not made aware of his death until 2 months earlier. They were told that he died in Ukraine. We do not know if he participated in in the war. They did not provide details. We do not know if he participated in the war. How is he, bro? What? I guess maybe this is. How do you not know if he participated in the war? He sent message, didn't he? It said he sent messages in their little group chat about him being there. I assume. And if he if he died in Ukraine, he went to Russia and he dies in Ukraine. Like, I think it's a very fair assumption that he did. This seems bananas to me. I wonder how she feels about because like she graduated in 1992, which was right around the end of the Cold War. So like I assume that she's has a certain distaste for Russia, I would assume, or at least favors the US and our allies over Russia. So I wonder how she feels about her son. I don't know if any of this is the case. She could be a complete lunatic, but like it wouldn't surprise me if she was like a somewhat more moderate leaning conservative, and then she has this kind of hippie-ish son who gets tricked by who gets sold a bill of lies by the right-wing media apparatus, the same exact one that probably got her in power, that the Russians are actually the good guys, the Ukrainians are the bad guys, and that he should give his life away to go support Russia trying to invade Ukraine. I I wonder if there's some really cruel, really, really cruel irony there. Um, Maybe. Obviously, a woman losing her son is not good. This guy dying is nobody dying like this is a good. I'm sure he was just the sympathy over contempt, right? I have sympathy that he was duped into doing this. I don't have contempt that he was an idiot and believes the wrong thing. Um, and it's a tragedy. It is definitely a tragedy, but it is fascinating that there are people in the CIA right now, top level CIA directors, whose relatives and whose son went to go fight for Russia against Ukraine when Ukraine's supposed to be our ally after we've just spent the last four, however many years, really since 2013, but especially in the last handful of years, um, helping them fight off the Russian invaders. So this story is wild to me. And I think it's not going to be like a super national headline story only because she's not the be top head CIA director. I think the fact that she's only a deputy director and also only the deputy director for whatever her thing was, digital something. That because it's not the big boy that it's not going to get as much attention as it might otherwise would. Even though I don't think it really is it. Does it change the significance of the story if it's the head CIA director or if it's one of the deputy directors? I don't really think so, but I think it makes it less headliney for sure. Alrighty, so I saw some headlines today that were about China and Trump coming to some trade deals. I'm They seemed very vague, and I haven't read the article or anything about this, but I am predicting before I even get into it that it's going to be him just sort of like making vague claims with absolutely no evidence, and that ultimately this article is going to lack in any real political substance. U.S. President Donald Trump this week said his administration is talking with China to strike a tariff deal and that Chinese President Xi Jinping had called him, Time magazine reported, as Beijing has so far disputed the U.S. characterization of talks. The Republican president, in an interview with the magazine on Tuesday that was published on Friday, did not say when Xi called or what the two leaders discussed. Trump said he would not call Xi. He's called, and I don't think that's a sign of weakness on his behalf. It's so sloppy. It's not a sign of weakness. This is ooh. China China's foreign ministry did not immediately respond to a request for commitment. China's foreign ministry did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Trump's statement. Before Trump's latest remarks were published, it had urged Washington to stop misleading the public on bilateral tariff negotiations, a comment reiterated by Beijing's embassy in Washington. Trump in the interview said he has made 200 tariff deals and expected to finish negotiations in about 3 or 4 weeks, likening the United States to a department store where he sets the price. He gave no details of any such deals. This makes me think that, like, he still doesn't understand how tariffs work. I think it was very, very clear, like, during the campaign and leading into his administration, how he talked about tariffs. He fundamentally did not understand how tariffs work. Either he fundamentally does not understand how tariffs work, or he knows very well how tariffs work, but is purposefully misleading his entire base for some weird reason. I don't think that's the case. I get more the impression when I watch clips of him talking about it that he thinks he's right and legitimately does not understand how the tariffs work. And so I thought that after he tried to implement the tariffs, there was the market freaked out, and everybody behind the scenes was screaming at him like, you can't do this. You're killing all your support. You're killing your legacy. You can't. These tariffs are bad and they're causing a lot of problems. You have to do something. And then he came out and, like, this was the whole flip floppy thing that happened a couple weeks ago, where, like, one day the tariffs were on, and then the next day they were off, and the next day they were, like, back on again, and then the next day they were, like, back off again. I thought that would, for the most part, be the end of the whole tariff saga. That, like, he kind of would have learned his lesson, put in some token, nominal, small tariff, leave it in place just so he's not wrong, because he can't be wrong, and so he can claim that the tariffs works at some point in the later, at some future date, he can come claim the tariffs work. Um, but the fact that he says that they're 3 or 4 weeks away from, which I don't believe, but that they're 3 or 4 weeks away from implementing 200 new tariff deals makes me think that he still, despite everybody around him screaming at him that this was bad, and I would have hoped explained to him the mechanisms by which all of this occurred, he still does not understand how the tariffs work. And so it's actually, I'm so shocked that they're still riding this train. But I guess it's not that surprising, right? If you look at the whole Kilmar, the dude that got sent to El Salvador without due process, they admitted that they did it wrong, and then when the judge said you have to return him to the US because you deported him on mistake, they doubled down and said, no, we're not going to do that. And to me, that just shows that they are really hyper focused on this. Trump can't lose. He's always a winner. He can never make a mistake. They are really doubling down on that. And so the fact that they did that for something like the Kilmar, the El Salvador dude, the fact that they did that, and it was national headlines, and people got very upset about it, and they just didn't care, makes me think that they probably very well maybe taking the same approach with tariffs here. That they don't that they are really completely separated from reality. They're completely separated from the effects of their policies from what they're doing, and that they are so ideologically driven to be a suck up to this idiot that we call Trump is scary. Asked if he would consider it a win if the US still had tariffs as high as 50% in a year, he told Time, total victory. So, yeah, tariffs as high as 50% a year, but does he understand that that increases the cost of things? If you import something, it would increase the cost of it by 50%. Obviously, not everything is imported, and obviously not everything is fully manufactured abroad. There are degrees to it and whatnot, and some things are made here. But, like, things like paper towels, like, typically things like that are made locally. But, like, when was this interview? When did it say this interview was? President said this week, Time magazine reported, Beijing. In an interview with the magazine on Tuesday that was published on Friday. Tuesday that was published on Friday. This Friday? So he's either talking. The interview either took place on the 22nd or the 15th. I'm gonna guess the 22nd, but I don't think it really changes my analysis if it's the 22nd or the 15th. That we were still at basically the same stage in the whole tariff situation, and that we were past that point where everybody freaked out and told him to stop, and that he did the whole flip flop and sort of uh, did a little course correction on the tariffs. That's yeah. I This only supports the claim that I just made that they're really doubling down on the Trump can't be wrong. Whatever daddy says goes. Ideologically, he's the king. Um, Results, what actually happens, statistics, facts, reality, none of that matters at all whatsoever. We're meeting with China. We're doing fine with everybody. But ultimately, I've made all the deals, Trump said. We're meeting with China. We're doing fine with everybody. But ultimately, I've made all the deals. The deal. The deal is a deal that I choose. View it differently. We are a department store, and we set the price. I meet with the companies, and then I set a fair price. What I consider to be a fair price. And they can pay it, or they don't have to pay it, he added. This is so stupid. Oh my God. Remember when people were going around calling the way he just like schizophrenically jumps from topic to topic, like they called it the weave. They tried to make it sound like he's some intellectual and that you just aren't on his same frequency level. I have unironically had somebody argue that to my face. I was My jaw was on the floor that anybody would eat that slop up. It is mind-boggling. And so when I read this, these two sentences, when I read this quote, I just cannot help but thinking, God damn, he has a really low English level. He's not good at talking. Like I worry about stuttering sometimes, or I worry about like wanting to be too precise on the pronunciation of words and then going back and saying the word again a couple of times. But like, why should I fucking care at all? Why should anybody care about any of that when you look at the transcript of what Trump says the president of the United States says on stage, says to the American public? It's crazy. Trump also laid out his plans to make various other deals with world leaders, from Russia's war in Ukraine to the Middle East with Iran and Saudi Arabia. Trump, who took office on January 20th and had vowed during his campaign to end the war in Ukraine on his first day. He claimed a lot of things on his first day, doesn't he? And those same people that would have said that he's going to do it day one seem to be very silent right now, aren't they? Wants a quick end to the fighting and told reporters on Thursday that he thinks they are close to a deal. He also said he had his own deadline, which he did not detail. Yeah, but he wants Ukraine to just give up, basically, right? I mean, my impression is that he just sort of likes Putin more, and so for whatever reason, I think there are interesting conspiracy theories about his ties to the Russian mob or things like that, but I don't really want to go too far into that. Um, he just he It seems to me more and more like he really does love these dictators and these authoritarian figures and just wants to be one of them. And what makes me keep thinking that is I saw today, I believe it's officially on the Trump merchandise store, Trump 2028 merchandise, on the official Trump store. To me, that signals that, and like anybody with a brain could have predicted that he wants to stay in office, that he's authoritarian fascist, and that he would take 10 terms if he could. Um, but I think with this idea that he's selling shirts saying that he's going to run for a third term means that like, look, I know exactly how this argument would go, right? I'd talk with one of my conservative friends about like, oh, it seems pretty wild that he's talking about third term, right? And they'd probably say, oh, he'd never do it. Or they would defend it by saying like, "Oh, well, what's wrong with that? If they change the rules, we had presidents that, what's they would question the idea of a two-term, the concept of a two-term and what's so holy about it." And while I don't think there is a real discussion to be had there about term limits and their usefulness and where the right line is to be drawn, anybody who thinks that he would have third term or a fourth term and just stop there is fucking insane. I heard somebody say this, and they're absolutely right. We are so lucky that Trump is not in his 60s, because if he was, it is entirely conceivable that he becomes basically like president for life or close to it, or has way too much time in office than he should. I mean, one term is way too much for him anyways. But like the idea of him having a third, fourth, fifth, sixth term is absolutely sickening. But yeah, these same people, I think if Biden flirted with the idea of running for a third term or fourth term, they would lose their minds. They'd be like, "Oh, he just wants to be a dictator. I guarantee you." But then when it's Daddy Trump, they find every way to justify it. His administration has ordered His administration has offered a proposal in recent days as U.S. officials met with Europeans and Ukrainians. His special envoy Steve Witkoff met with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin on Friday. In his comments published on Friday, Trump told Time that Crimea, which Russia seized from Ukraine in 2024, would remain in Moscow's hands. In his comments published on Friday, Trump told Time that Crimea. Okay, so I'm a little bit mixed on this. On one hand, in theory, it's nice to say like, "Oh, we should support Ukraine all the way until we can't have unlimited support for Ukraine, right? You have to anytime you support someone like that, or if you support a country, you have to condition that support to something realistic, right? Is it realistic for Ukraine to get all of its territory back, including what Russia annexed in 2013, Crimea? I really question how viable that is. I would guess. I would guess that I would I would guess that because Russia has been dug in Crimea since 2013, that taking it would be much more difficult than taking some of the land that Russia has claimed in more recent years. Um, and so I would certainly be open to a discussion over whether, like, the conditions that we put on Ukraine, whether they should include, like, all right, you can't, we'll support you until you reclaim these areas, but maybe not until you fully reclaim Crimea. I think there's a serious discussion to be had there. This statement sort of is kind of correct. Crimea will stay with Russia, and Zelensky understands that, and everybody understands that it's been with them for a long time. It's been with them long before Trump came along, he said. I don't Obviously, the length of time that they hold it doesn't make it any more legitimate, but, like, I'm not giving Trump credit here because he's not coming at it from this logical perspective that, like, "Oh, maybe it's not realistic for us to take Crimea back, but we'll support you for the rest of it," sort of thing, or, "We can talk about what we can support you for." He's not coming at it from that, though. He just doesn't wanna support them at all. And so I think it's kind of cynical for him to sort of paint it like, "Oh, I'm just making a reasonable, good faith analysis here that Crimea is just gonna stay with Russia, and that's just how it is." He's not saying that like, "Oh, it's unrealistic for us to take it, and that, it's probably best if we just leave it with them." He's just saying that like, it's theirs, and it's been theirs for a long time, which is just not that just doesn't make sense. In the Middle East, Trump predicted that Saudi Arabia will enter the Abraham Accords, the series of normalization agreements Trump's administration negotiated between Israel and some Gulf countries during his first term. "I think Saudi Arabia will go into the Abraham Accords," he said, "will happen." He added that he thinks the US will make a deal with Iran. Asked whether he was open to meeting Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei or President Mossad Pezeshkian, Trump replied, "Sure." Trump has said he will visit Saudi Arabia and the region next month. Trump, who promised on the campaign trail to use his term in office as retribution, also defended his use of presidential power domestically in targeting law firms, foreign students, and former U.S. officials. All right, I think that's something I've got to talk about tomorrow or next recording is his extorting of law firms. It seems beyond the pale. Um, as far as I understand, he's been literally extorting law firms for free pro bono work and then like claiming that like it's some sort of victory. Like, also, why would you want free work from somebody you extorted? But anyways, uh, I've got to be doing something right because I've had a lot of law firms give me a lot of money. Yeah, yeah, you're doing something right. Yeah, the mob boss says the exact same thing when he gets the money from from the local laundromats. He's like, "Oh, I must be doing something right. They're giving me a lot of money, huh?" Yeah, I bet you fucking are. He defended the revocation of student visas, saying they can protest, but they can't destroy the schools like they did with Columbia and others. I can't remember any. I'm not up to date on every single one of these little stupid protests. It doesn't fucking matter. But like, I destroyed Columbia. As far as I understand, Columbia University is very much still there, and that the idea that it's been destroyed is it's just laughable. So much of this is just so laughable. It feels like I'm. It feels like I'm in an alternate reality. Like I was raised in an era of intelligent people, and I've just been dropped. Bunch of fucking retards. Asked if he would direct the U.S. Department of Justice to disclose any evidence it had tying to Tufts University student who was arrested to militant group Hamas, Trump said he was not aware of the particular case, but would look into it. Turkish national Rameza Uzta has said U.S. immigration authorities unlawfully arrested her based on her pro-Palestinian advocacy, including co-authoring an opinion piece on Tufts student newspaper. Trump also defended his targeting in a recent order of Christopher Krebs, who he fired as head of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency in 2020 during his first term. Trump also defended his targeting in a recent. Okay, so we're in La La Land. And so pretty much what I predicted about this article was right, right? That it's pretty vague. There really isn't any substance here. He's just sort of vaguely claiming like, "Oh, we're doing deals." And this article is kind of all over the place because it talks about it's not very focused. It talks about these trade deals that he's negotiating with China and Xi, but then it jumps over to Russia and Crimea and like potential deals. Like none of this is in the title of the article, right? This article is like 5 different topics, but the title only mentions one of them. It's very strange. All right, so let's cover this last one quickly. I don't know how quickly we're going to be able to cover this. We might have to cut this short. Exclusive Greenland Freedom City rich donors push Trump for a tech hub up north. So this is a story. This is not a new story, but it's something that I heard about that's maybe worth discussing. I had heard something about some of these billionaire rich guys that are Trump has surrounded himself with, guys like Peter Thiel, guys like Elon, and some of these other weirdos are wanting to create their own little country in Greenland. That's what I heard, and that's what I heard that like big part of the reason behind this push for Greenland is, yeah, they use the military, defense as a lame excuse, but like do you really think if we went to Greenland and was like, let us pop down a couple military bases here, here, and here, and you're completely, and your swaths of unused land, that they wouldn't let us do that? No, of course not. We already have military bases there. So the idea that like we would need to annex all of Greenland for some defense purpose is stupid. Um, Really, it seems to me like there's some other nefarious motivation, and that nefarious motivation may be this whole Freedom City thing. The idea that these guys want to be tyrants, uh, they want to be rulers of their own little fiefdoms. As the Trump administration intensifies efforts to acquire Greenland from Denmark or take it by force, some Silicon Valley tech investors are promoting the frozen island as a site for a so-called freedom city, a libertarian utopia with minimal corporate regulation. Three people familiar with the matter told Reuters. That is like it's what do you call it? An oxymoron, right? Those two things are antithetical. A libertarian utopia, that doesn't make sense. You cannot have a libertarian utopia, depending on how you define utopia. But by the way most people would define utopia, it would be impossible to achieve being libertarian. This seems terrible. The discussions are in early stages, but the idea has been taken seriously by Trump's pick for Denmark ambassador Ken Howery, who is expected to be confirmed by Congress in the coming months and lead Greenland acquisition negotiations, the people said. Howery, whose involvement with the idea hasn't been previously reported, once co-founded a venture capital firm with tech billionaire Peter Thiel, a leading advocate for such low regulation cities. Oh, yeah, big shocker. Howery is also a longtime friend of Elon Musk, a top Trump advisor. Yeah, there just seems to be too much, when the saying where there's smoke, there's fire, right? There is some smoke here, and it's really hard not to think there might be some fire as well. Howery declined to comment. The White House did not respond to requests for comment. Sources who spoke to Reuters requested anonymity to discuss private conversations. The vision for Greenland, one of the people said, could include a hub for artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, space launches, micronuclear reactors, and high-speed rail. This is like somebody was playing like Sim City, like not one of the Sims games, but one of the Sims games that's like oriented towards building an entire city. It's like somebody went into one of those games, gave themselves an unlimited budget, and then was just like, what is a 15-year-old on chronically online 15-year-old boy's dream? And it would be what, nuclear reactors, space launches, artificial intelligence hub, autonomous vehicles. That doesn't, all this is buzzword bullshit. Like, it means nothing. The discussions reflect a long-standing Silicon Valley movement to establish low-regulation cities globally, including in the United States, which Trump himself promised to do in a 2023 campaign video. Proponents use different names for variations on the idea, including startup cities or charter cities, with the common goal of spurring innovation through exemption. Spurring innovation. What the fuck does that even mean, bro? Spurring innovation is code word for we want to not have safety regulations, and we want to pay people. We don't want to have a minimum wage and things like that. Um, I can only see if they were actually. This seems like similar in concept to the idea of like Shanghai or Hong Kong, these economic exclusion zones where the rules by which Hong Kong and some of these, even though they're a part of China, the rules by which they play by economically in a global context, different than those that are in mainland China. And it does give them the ability to do some stuff that otherwise might be difficult or impossible to do just in mainland China proper. But I I think I trust China that they would come at it from a strategic perspective. I am not convinced that we would be doing the same. I would fully expect that if something like this were to actually come to fruition in the way that they want it to, that it would be it would be a binary class system, right? There would be the rich people who are being serviced, and then there would be the poor people living probably in slums or something close to slums that are there to do the servicing. And that there would be effectively two groups of people, the kings and the servants, or the kings and the serfs, the lords and the serfs. So this seems like such a terrible idea. Well, okay, it seems like a I'm my impre I my understanding is that I don't feel like the rules that we have inside the United States really like hamper our ability for companies to compete globally. So I don't think the case to be made to create an economic exclusion zone or freedom city, whatever the fuck you want to call it, is really there. But even if there was an argument to be made there, or even if you could maybe argue that it's a good thing on its own and that there's some merit there, I do not trust this administration and their intentions behind doing something like this. Absolutely not. The administration's consideration of such a quixotic quest underscores the growing clout of tech magnates and Trump's increasingly expansionist foreign policy. After campaigning, I'm going to cut this short right here. My computer is about to die. I will pick up this article next time, as well as some other stuff. Well, this has been April 25th, 2025. I am Michael Winkler, and this has been the Mike Wink Show. Peace out.